Yo, what's shaking, everybody? It is a National Signing Day 2 edition of the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Jason Sukamel. This video brought to you by RogueShop.com. Use your promo code Orangebloods for the best of Texas's home for legal CBD, THC, and more. Do us a solid. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, do all those things we beg you to do, implore you to do on a daily basis. It is National Signing Day 2. We don't expect a lot of action today, but that doesn't mean that we don't at least talk about what might be on the table for the Texas Longhorns. Jason, I've been hitting refresh all day on Twitter. There's literally nothing happening outside of, I think, some of the schools that just hired new coaches are bringing in guys today. So I've seen some Nebraska. I've seen a little bit of Colorado, I think, but for the most part, this is a day where we'll watch Warren Roberson, the safety out of Red Oak. We'll watch Deuce Robinson to see if anything happens there. We're not anticipating it. We'll have a conversation with Steve Sarkisian later this morning at about 11 o'clock, 2 hours from now. And then I don't know that this day is going to have a whole lot more than that.
Yeah, I'm looking on Rivals.com's main landing page, and they've got their National Signing Day announcement guide. And the first one they have, ironically, is Warren Roberson for 10 a.m. Well, I'm not expecting that to happen, and we'll talk about that. The next announcements are like 10 a.m., noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and there aren't many. I mean, let's be honest, Catch. This is the day we all used to look forward to, right? The first Wednesday in February. That's when everything came to a head. And with the early signing window, it's made this, National Signing Day 2 mostly anticlimactic. There are some things we'll be watching, and some schools will be landing commitments today. But for Texas, it's a small group. You mentioned a couple guys, and that's really about it. But Sark meets today with the media. It'll be a Zoom call because of the weather here in Austin, which isn't probably helping my mood. It's like everything's covered in ice, and just makes you want to lay on a couch under a blanket. But Sark will answer. I'll be interested at his press conference today. It'll be a lot of spring football talk. There'll be some looking back at the December signings, but he already talked about them. He didn't talk about a guy like Jelani McDonald at the last press conference, the signing day press conference, because Jelani didn't announce until January. So, and then somebody will probably or hopefully ask him, and maybe I'll hop on and do it myself. Like, are you expecting more additions to this class down the road? That's the one key recruiting question I want to ask, because I'm not sure we're going to get those answers today. I'm not expecting guys to announce today, but we might get something from Roberson later this week. Deuce Robinson, maybe something happens with him at some point down the road. But yeah, not the most eventful National Signing Day 2, but it'll still hold some interest.
Yeah, I think the question of the day with Sarkisian for me is, how many more spots do they think they really have to work with in a world where, let's say they found everything they were looking for? What does that actually mean? So what positions do we think they would like to still address if they could? I think wide receiver, ironically enough, might still be one. They would have taken two in the transfer portal early on if it had been the right two. Obviously, we know that they end up getting A.D. Mitchell. Maybe that's enough. I think he'll probably say they'll get through the spring and evaluate the roster and then make decisions from there. But we know the edge position is a position that, there's a couple of different ways to look at it. Either it's brimming with young talent just waiting to get on the field, or it's really inexperienced and unproven. And maybe it's both of those things at the same time, but how they handle that will be interesting.
I think interior defensive line too. Bo Davis tried to make a late run at a couple high school, or at least one high school guy, literally in the last week and a half or so. He's flirted with some JUCO guys. So edge, of course, I think they're always looking for edge. It's pretty clear Bo wants another interior defensive lineman too. So I think that's another position we'll be watching with the portal.
Well, and with the signing of Jalen Catalon, I had said all along, if you're going to take that guy as your safety, you might take another safety just to make sure you've got an insurance policy against Jalen Catalon, the transfer from Arkansas, not holding up physically, because that's been a problem for him for the last couple of years. I wonder if Warren Roberson is the backup policy, which is curious because he's not a midterm guy. And should he flip from TCU to Texas, which we're expecting, I don't know that I'm expecting a first-year contribution from Roberson outside of special teams. He's actually, this isn't the kind of thing that will give people the warm and fuzzies, right? But he's a phenomenal special teams player. And I can see him being a gunner or a guy that contributes on coverage teams in year one. He really is good on special teams. It's part of his highlight tape on Huddle that jumps out the most, just how many times on coverage teams in high school he's running down the field and making plays. I'm curious, again, the numbers, what he thinks they're already over 85 with the allotment that they have. So they're going to need some attrition. I think they expect attrition to occur every year anyway. I mean, we've already seen some, but more will need to occur. How he addresses that and kind of what he reveals will be pretty interesting today. And look, you mentioned it with Roberson. It kind of remains, I mean, at the end of the day, by the end of the week, we expect that he will sign with Texas and be a member of this recruiting class. It just remains to be seen whether or not that's a today or is it Friday? Like you said, he could sign today. And I think what will happen is he will sign today. Mm-hmm. And then if he decides to make a big announcement out of it on Friday, Texas will just wait until that happens before releasing this guy's joined our class tweet.
Kind of like exactly what happened with Jelani McDonald. He signed in December. He announces at the All-American Bowl. As soon as that happens, then Texas has, here's an addition to our class press release. Warren Roberson's interesting catch because, technically he is still committed to TCU, right? A week and a half ago, roughly early last week, comes out he's going to visit Texas. I'm talking to his coach, talked to a TCU source, and they're like, yeah, we don't think he's going to wind up at TCU. TCU's trying to hold on to him. His coach told me the plan was for him to probably announce on Wednesday, today, National Signing Day 2. I reached out yesterday to an assistant coach on the Red Oak staff and said, hey, is he still announcing on Wednesday? Or are y'all still having a ceremony on Wednesday? And they said, no, because of the weather, we're going to push it back and do an announcement ceremony on Friday. That was a pretty immediate response. And then I responded to that and I said, okay, just for clarification, does that mean he's going to sign on Wednesday or he's going to sign on Wednesday and announce on Friday? And I've never heard a response. So that I'm kind of with you. If I'm trying to read the tea leaves, I think he probably signs today, and they just didn't want that out there. I think he probably signs today, and then they announce it on Friday after he and some teammates have a ceremony at the school. I'm going to say this, Catch. I'm pretty sure it's Texas. I feel pretty good about Texas. He took that Texas official visit. Every sign we kind of try to read points to Texas. He did visit USC recently, per Nick Harris, unofficially. And, I'm still hearing like TCU, people on the TCU side as recently as this week think it's kind of gone back and forth, TCU, Texas. So they're not throwing in the towel. And Warren Roberson, I think I said it on our Slack channel. Great kid, I'm sure, but he's been a pain in the behind to cover. He does not communicate with anybody. Even his own coaches, he really doesn't communicate with. So, he's a tough kid to get a crystal clear read on him. I don't have a future cast pick in because he's committed to TCU, so we can't put those in. My pick has been on Texas ever since he decided to visit. Just the timing of it made a lot of sense. He's going to visit right before the dead period, the National Signing Day 2. I've heard he wasn't crazy about the safety numbers that TCU took. He views Texas as a little more inviting, among other things that Texas has to sell, of course. But I'm picking Texas. But this isn't one of these deals, to be clear to people watching, where, we know it's a stone cold lock to Texas. And, I want to say we don't have a story written, because we do have a story written, but it's not a story written that we know with 100% certainty it's going to be Texas. I feel pretty confident about that pick, but I'm leaving myself a little bit of wiggle room.
I've got the instant analysis written as well. So we're ready to go when and if it happens. But yeah, there's some clarity that's lacking. And the question today will be, will we get any clarity? Kind kind of leaning towards no, but it's good that we've had a little bit of intrigue on National Signing Day. We should be thankful for Warren Roberson just for keeping us on our toes. I guess Deuce Robinson is the other guy keeping us on our toes. Tom G jumps into the super chat. Deuce Robinson not signing today. Is this a good thing for us? Also, BB is a priority for him. Baseball. And all the years we don't have a top 25 team going into the season, how big of a deal do you think this makes? It's interesting. I mean, I think I referenced this, Jason, in an update that I wrote last night on the website about Deuce. We were hearing level 1 information last week that it was Georgia and USC.
And we also jump in. I kind of teased it in the war room. I said, hey, don't be surprised if he doesn't sign, because we had heard that, but I was asked to kind of keep it quiet. And I thought at the time, I said, hey, that might bode well for Texas. So it kind of leads into Tom G's question. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think today I think if Deuce was signing today, he's signing with Georgia.
Mm-hmm, I agree.
No matter the one constant in any top 2 that's ever given out is Georgia. And USC and Texas, I think, have flip-flop places. I told a guy last week what we had been hearing about Georgia and USC being the top 2. This particular person kind of shrugged his shoulders and acted like he wasn't completely alarmed by it, that it's been fluid enough that it changes kind of by the day and by the week in the conversation. As of yesterday, Texas continues to feel like they've got a real shot. This thing, he's not going to sign today, it doesn't look like. And I think that does play well for Texas. There's a possibility that this is going to go on for months, that he may wait and watch the college baseball seasons. The fact that things kind of change with regards to where his head is on a daily and weekly basis is reason, I think, on their side to say, you know what, there's no reason for us to rush. For those watching this video that don't know this, that kid, none of the kids that sign letters of intent have to sign letters of intent. They could choose to not sign letters of intent. They don't lose anything other than maybe the guaranteed spot in the signing class. That they don't. But for a 5-star kid, the only thing that you get by signing a letter of intent is the loss of leverage. If you have any doubts at all, if you want to wait for more information to become available, Terrell Pryor is probably the guy that sticks out the most for me all these years later when he took his recruitment deep beyond signing day. Deuce could do the exact same thing. He could never sign a letter of intent and just show up at a school. He could make his decision in March, April, May, June. I mean, he's got a lot of flexibility, and it seems like his father and him have a good idea of like the power they have with his position. So the longer this thing goes on, I think, the better it potentially is for Texas, because they're not giving up. And like I said, on the Texas side of things, I sense they think they still have more than a fighting chance, probably more so than anybody but Mike Farrell would concede. Mike Farrell is saying that Texas is going to sign Deuce Robinson. We have not heard that. I mean, even as of last night, no one was telling me that. But Texas does feel like they've got a chance. I think it was handicapped to me last night as like 50-50. So rather than say that, I just said a coin flip, which is 50-50. But that's kind of the way they view it behind the scenes right now.
Let's be honest. I'm not even sure this guy goes to college. If I heard 3 months ago from some Arizona sources that baseball was still very much in play in terms of him just going pro, not going to college. It may even have been the desired path. Now, how high is he going to be drafted? That remains to be seen. But, I think he's playing it smart. I mean, it's kind of frustrating for recruiting fans, but you're right. Why lose leverage and why lock yourself into something when this guy has so many potential pathways he could take? I'm not fully convinced, Catch, and I haven't heard this from Deuce. I haven't heard it from his family members, but my gut tells me, my hunch tells me, if they had their choice, he'd probably just go play pro baseball, and that would be it, and have a great life and have a great living there doing that. But, there's some debate on how high of a draft prospect he'll be. Is he a high enough draft prospect where he wants to forego the college life and college baseball and college football? I don't know. And I think that's part of why they're waiting so long, part of why they're waiting to, not locking themselves into any kind of decision. But I mean, you put it in your column last night. That's good updated information. But and I've been hearing it for a couple of months. I mean, baseball might be the priority, and there's very much the possibility that he doesn't even go to college. So that's another option he's trying to figure out.
And it's not the financial piece of the baseball thing that is really, the itch that he's wanting to scratch. There's a love of the two sports. And I get the sense from talking to people that baseball is really, really, really important. He's a 5-star in football. The easiest path to being a professional athlete moving forward for him would be to play football and make it as a tight end. There's a sense from people who are involved in discussions with him and his family that they just they love baseball. And so it makes his decision on football really tricky because there's more nuance to the baseball thing. There's where will he go in the draft? And they're not going to wait until the draft to make a decision. I was told last night it's too late in the process that to make a football and school decision in July, late July at that, because the draft, I think, is in the middle of July, just isn't, I think, feasible. It's a little too late. But he may want to watch these college programs. And I got the sense last night that my Texas source on this was a little apprehensive. Like, Tom mentioned it in his Super Chat questions. Of all the years for Texas to be a borderline top 25 team as opposed to a team hosting a super regional and all of those types of things, this isn't the year to do that. But it's not like Georgia and USC are major powers in the sport that so I don't know. I don't know how to completely talk about where his recruitment goes from here. It's just not cut and dry.
But if he waits until, he's not going to wait till the draft, like you said, because it's whatever, late July, mid-July or something. But he'll have a pretty good idea, I would think, by, let's just say May or something after he plays his senior year, right? And scouts see him some more. I mean, he'll have a pretty good idea where he's projected in the draft. Then, someone mentioned he could be a preferred walk-on. He could do, similar to something like what Ricky did. He could sign with a pro team and still go to college and play football. But, he's got a lot of options on the table. But, I think fans get frustrated, and even I've heard some media members like, "Oh, come on, kid, just make a decision." But I think he's kind of being smart with the ways he's handling it. If I'm being honest, he's playing his cards pretty smartly.
Yeah, I look at it from signing day for a guy like him is kind of arbitrary. He doesn't have to sign on this Wednesday. The schools want to get it over with because they just want to move on and move on to the next year. But if he's genuinely not ready and there's some indecision there, why wouldn't you wait? I mean, most kids can't pull this off. Most kids in the Texas recruiting class can't pull this off. But there are some that could. If Arch Manning wanted to wait, he could. If Cedric Baxter wanted to wait, he could. You have to be really a high-level, probably borderline 5-star talent for schools to just decide we'll wait to do whatever it is that you want to do. But he falls into that category. And I was joking with the person I was talking to last night about this, that they seem to understand. They have a full understanding of what they can do based on the leverage they have from the position they have, and they're using it. And, Texas isn't going to stop recruiting the kid. None of the schools at the top, USC and Georgia, aren't going to stop recruiting the kid based on him deciding to wait. And that's, again, there might be 25 to 50 kids in the country you would do that with. He falls into that category. And to be fair, Georgia is the school that I think if you and I had to bet $1,000 on, and if gun to our head type of situation, that's the school that we would pick. There's been a lot of conversation that their offensive coordinator might leave to take another job. And if that's the case, maybe wait that out just to make sure that there aren't any shenanigans where the day after signing day, the OC takes a job someplace else. So,
and his dad mentioned that on an interview with Adam Gorney on Rivals. He said, there's potential coaching changes. Look at Lincoln Riley last year. He didn't mention the Georgia OC, but he mentioned Lincoln Riley last year, and just how late shifting coaching stuff, can have an impact too. So that could be, you add it all up, and that's another chip on the side of the scale as to why it may make sense for them to wait.
I think if you're Texas, man, you're probably rooting for this thing to be prolonged and extended as far as possible. The one thing Texas really has going in its advantage is from an NIL perspective, I've been told it's not even competitive. That what Texas can offer versus what USC and Georgia are talking about are wildly different. It might be that he's trying to, and the dad are trying to get the other schools to be able to compete.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, if NIL is going to be a factor, Texas has the largest of all the advantages that Texas has. It's probably on that side of things. And so the longer this goes on, I think the better chance Texas has. If you're Georgia, you're like, we're the team in front. The only thing that can happen from here on out in terms of change is bad for us. So I think it's funny that Texas and Georgia are duking it out again. It seems like there's been a little bit more and more. I think there's like a Georgia-Texas mini rivalry that we can see take place in in the SEC. They won't play each other enough, I'm thinking, for there to be a real rivalry. But they're coming across each other in recruiting more and more in the last couple of years. The A.D. Mitchell thing that just happened certainly makes that a little bit more of a hot button topic on the Georgia side of things. It's fun to see these two schools. If you're Texas, you're even competing with Georgia right now in recruiting for a kid that's not in your state, a national prospect. It does speak to the recruiting chops and the magnitude of the lure of coming to Texas, that even when they're down, they still have a puncher's chance against the big dog nationwide right now.
Yeah, but if you're Texas, you better start playing better, because you don't want to piss off Georgia and then have to play them every other year or something. So,
real quick, you mentioned earlier that when the first National Signing Day occurred, that Jelani McDonald hadn't yet signed because he made his announcement at the All-America game in San Antonio. This kind of surprised me. So I did an article that I just posted over at Orangebloods in the last hour, so you may not have even seen it. But
I saw it. I hadn't poured through it, but I saw the super blue chip.
So I was curious. I know how Rivals identifies the top two tiers in their rankings, but it's a little bit less cut and dry with the way other services number and rate their prospects. So I went in to try to approximate where each of the major services had players ranked just in the state of Texas. I suppose I could have done all of the Texas commitments, but I was more interested statewide how it broke down. Texas has 3 guys that everybody ranked as super blue chip prospects from within the state of Texas. And I think everybody can name them, right? It's Jonte Cook, it's Malik Muhammad, and it's Anthony Hill. All of those guys, all of the services loved. What I wanted to find out, though, is on some of the other guys, once you get beyond the top 7 or 8 guys in the state, it's not quite as much of a consensus. What I found that was really interesting to me is if you eliminate Jonte Cook, Anthony Hill, and Malik Muhammad, the guy in the signing class that Texas already has from the state of Texas that made the most super blue chip lists, three of the five, if you include my Lone Star recruiting list, Rivals 24/7 on 3 and ESPN. The guy that was in the super blue chip territory the most, Jelani McDonald. I would not have guessed that before I started going through the exercise, but the data would show that he's the fourth highest consensus rated prospect in this class from the state of Texas. Kind of a surprise. I don't know who I would have thought, maybe Colton Vasek or somebody like that, but that he's so highly thought of makes me think that his signing is of all the guys that Texas has signed, that one may be the most underrated in terms of the way the public talks about him, because he's right up there with the other guys in terms of being highly ranked among the in-state prospects that Texas signed.
And I think a lot of that probably stems from just seeing him at that All-American Bowl. I mean, we've heard Alex Dunlap talk about it on the modcast. Is he had no idea who he was, and he came up to me like, "Who's that dude?" I go, "Dude, that's future Longhorn Jelani McDonald." But I mean, just unbeknownst to Alex, I mean, he just saw this some kids like, that's a good-looking player. So, I mean, he sure looked the part down in San Antonio with his length and his size and his frame and his ability to play corner. Down in San Antonio, which I don't think that's going to happen in college, but Texas is looking at him at a nickel position, maybe a linebacker at some point. Yeah, he certainly looks the part physically. I mean, he's a multi-sport, tremendous athlete in multiple sports, a guy that can do a little bit of everything for you. You know, the Colton Vasek one, to me, I'm looking at your article, Catch. Your LSR rankings and Rivals are the only two that have him ranked as a super blue chip. That's a little bewildering to me. I mean, I would have thought for sure at least one other service would have had him in that area versus Jelani. It's your LSR 24/7 and on 3. So
a little more diverse. I mean, yes. Rivals and I don't walk in lockstep.
Right, exactly.
But we are partners.
Yes, exactly right. So, the Rivals umbrella, if you will, is the only one who has Colton Vasek as a super blue chip, which is a bit surprising to me, but we're talking about Jelani, but I'd be curious, like, did you have him Catch as a super blue chip before San Antonio?
I did not.
Yeah. I don't know.
I had him at like 25. So he moved up from that territory of just on the outside to definitely inside. I felt the same way about Pimpton, the tight end too. Like I saw him in the All-Star game and I was like, oh God, that guy looks like a freak next to the freaks.
Yep.
So
I think either 24/7 or on 3 had Jelani ranked pretty highly going into that week. I can't remember which one, but I would assume, like you, they probably moved him up after his showing down in San Antonio. So that's a case where Vasek probably got hurt a little bit from not participating in an All-Star game, and Jelani McDonald, I think, really helped himself because he was a bit, let's be honest, he was a bit of I wouldn't say an unknown, certainly, but he wasn't a big-time, high-profile name when he went down to San Antonio. He goes down there and looks like $1 million and reaps the rewards from it.
Yeah, I mean, again, the thing about McDonald with the ranking that he has is it turns out that he is one of the 13. He's, the company he's keeping is only 13 players were ranked as a super blue chip by 3 or more of the rankings. And so, and
Toviano.
What's that?
He's right there with Toviano as a three-time super blue chip. I mean,
exactly. And the company that he keeps with the Jaquays Petaway, Calvin Simpson Hunt, Javion Toviano, and then Jelani McDonald. They're the guys in the three groups of rankings ranked him that high. Above them is the 4-time super blue chip, which is Jalen Helen, Braylon Shelby. And then you get into the category of guys that had at least one service ranking them as a 5-star. There were 7 players that were listed as a 5-star by at least one service. Malik Muhammad had 1, Reuben Owens had 1, Jonte Cook had 2, and then Peyton Bowen, Anthony Hill, and Jackson Arnold had 4. and I called him the super duper blue chip. The only guy ranked as a 5-star in all 5 sets of rankings is David Hicks, the defensive end out of the Katy area. And now, to me, I had David Hicks ranked as the number 1 player in the state. The fact that he's the only guy ranked as a 5-star among all 5 of those sets of rankings, to me, probably indicates that he's the right pick as number 1. Mm-hmm. That there's the group below him of 3 guys that you could probably rank in any order. This weirdly works as kind of a composite, if you will, right? It's the idea of what 24/7's composite does in mashing together all of the rankings. But the thing that's different about the composite is that if you've got, there's not enough data points. And if there's an extreme ranking, right? So if everybody has a guy in the top 5 and there's one service though that has a guy ranked at 50, mm-hmm. it will totally drag down what his overall ranking would look like. So I thought this was an interesting way of doing it, just doing it in tiers. I wasn't prepared for what would be revealed. Like I had no idea. As much as I kind of knew the ins and outs of the rankings, when I started doing this yesterday, I didn't have a clear indication of, I didn't know that Jelani McDonald would be in that tier. And because it really surprised me. I was like, well, I started bolding the Texas guys and I was like, wow, McDonald is high up there. And I don't even think when he committed, we sold it as important of a victory for Texas as it turned out to be. Jason, let's wrap this thing up. Guys, this was our National Signing Day 2 live show. We'll be back in a few hours with a review, Anwar and I, of the Steve Sarkisian press conference. There will almost certainly be a lot of spring football and kind of look-ahead conversation and not as much about what happens today, quite frankly. The smart money is there won't be anything new to really talk about today other than he hasn't gone on record about A.D. Mitchell, and Jelani McDonald wasn't in the class, as we've mentioned, when he first signed. So you've got a couple of things that they can talk about from a new personnel standpoint, from announcing. But for the most part, it will be a lot of 30,000 feet up in the air discussion about where the Texas program is, what they want to do going into the spring, what personnel conversations they want to have. So join us a little bit later on in the day. If you haven't already done so, hit that thumbs up button. Give us a like. Subscribe to the channel. Thanks to RogueShop.com for being the sponsor of this video. Use that promo code Orangebloods and check out Texas Home for legal CBD, THC, and more. One of my favorite places. Although when I feel, and one of the bad things about being like feeling sick, Jason, is that I'm not able to use the CBD and THC like it just doesn't work for me when I feel bad. I have to feel good and then I can get a little loopy. But when I already feel loopy, I can't get more loopy. It just does nothing. So I'm kind of out of action on the Rogue Shop products today. But you don't have to be. Check out the website. Go shop and use that promo code Orangebloods. For myself and Jason Sukumel and Blake behind the scenes producing the show, thanks for hanging out with us. We will be back in a few hours. Until then, you guys take